Rahul Gandhi did a press conference and held up a big constitution. I hope they actually open that constitution. And
Welcome everyone to another episode of The Overcorrection. We have Puru back in studio.
the responsibility lies with Mamata Banerjee. So if she's currently on a protest against herself, I don't really know how that works.
They're trying to implement a secular civil code. You'd be like, man, those anti-religion liberals are at it again. What is the point of the ceiling? You're paying a toll to get jammed for 45 minutes.
Famous YouTubers had to put a post and then take down the post because there are powerful people involved. There is massive brain drain. You can't really blame a woman for wanting to get out of the country.
In fact, silly that we didn't have a broadcast bill so far. Just ambiguously written, leave scope for crazy levels of...
They had to throw a bone, obviously, to Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, which they did. And they squeezed the middle class, as always, on taxes. Passing laws where women can get married at the age of 9. We are not Iraq, I hope. It just is a movement. It stays on Instagram. We talk about it a few times and it dies away.
A country becomes developed not when the poor can take private transport, but when the rich take public transport. Why do people think we're idiots because of our
Sobo accent?
चाहे तो हम ये पॉडकास्ट हिंदी में कर सकते हैं या तो मैं तमिल में कर सकता हूँ और वो मराठी में भी कर सकता है. But if you are listening to what language we're speaking in and not what we're saying, then you're clearly missing what this podcast is about.
Welcome everyone to another episode of The Overcorrection. After Independence Day last week, we have Puru back in studio. He's got some free time from work.
Yeah, it's good to be independent from work every now and then.
Yeah. So how did you spend your Independence Day? Because I know what you did for exactly 98 minutes of it.
Yeah, I don't know. For the last maybe 5-6 years, it's become a really fun practice, I think, to actively listen to the Prime Minister's speech from the Red Fort. For a few reasons, actually. I think the first being people have a lot to say. The commentariat has a lot to say about the Prime Minister and what he's done to the country. But I feel like it also shows how people just don't listen to primary sources anymore. He's talking and people don't listen, right? Indians don't listen. Elite Indians, I bet if you ask them, hey, did you actually watch what the Prime Minister has said in the Independence Day speech in the last 5 years? They'd be like, no, I've never listened to a single one.
And they'll have watched Faye D'Souza or Palki Sharma, the 5-10 minute report on it.
Yeah, they'll watch the analysis about it, but they won't actually take the time needed to listen to the Independence Day speech, right?
Do you think some things are missed?
Yeah, I think it's like you're missing the intent of that speaker, right? It's not... The funny thing is, you know, when we were studying history and political science, you wish, I wish all I could do was go to that primary source in my research. That would help me so much. Here you have the primary source, but you're choosing to go to the secondary source. But these same people, if I ask them, hey, did you watch that famous debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden? They would have watched the whole thing. They would have watched the debate between two presidential candidates about domestic affairs that have no impact on them. But they will actually not watch the Independence Day speech for their own country. That should tell you a lot.
Yeah, it's quite sad.
Right? But, you know, I think why I thought the speech was interesting, I think he touched on a few things and I'd love to kind of use that as a base of which I feel a lot of topics had come up. I think the first one, which of course we can't, I think, do this podcast without talking about, is the saddest part. And the Prime Minister acknowledged it as atrocities against women, right? I do want to give a warning to all our viewers. I know this is a very delicate and hard subject to listen to. So feel free to skip past this if you need to.
Yeah. And like with a lot of atrocious things that happen, people get distracted by the politics still, even in something so horrendous.
Horrendous. It's like you can't even read it. That's how horrifying the incident was at RG Kar Hospital. So as much as I tend to not believe in trigger warnings, I think especially Indian guys should be listening to this segment, right? It's not something you should skip past. I just want to put that out there. But as you know, I don't want to go into the facts about it.
Yeah, and I like this one thing that Faye D'Souza actually commented on it. Like, women are not asking for men's protection, they're asking for basic safety.
Correct.
And I think that distinction is a interesting one that she has made.
Correct.
Because the elements of protection imply some level of subservience where they need us to do
It
something. It
reinforces that patriarchal concept, right?
But safety is a basic fundamental human right.
I think we have a lot of unlearning and relearning to do as men, and hold each other accountable to whatever it is, whether it's bad locker room talk, people reinforcing bad ideas about equality. I think we need to speak up more, and I know that we're going to try. But what I wanted to touch on is, again, the politicization of something like this so quickly. It's jarring, to be honest, right? By the way, there's been a 4-day delay almost on this picking up the media storm that it did, right?
Okay.
And this goes to show you the sheer level of negligence on behalf of the ruling party in West Bengal, the TMC and Mamata Banerjee as the chief minister. And what I don't like in this is that it's quickly becoming... See, my point is a movement without a direct action item. It just is a movement. It stays on Instagram. We talk about it a few times and it dies away. Right? Yes, it is a larger problem in India. Acknowledged and real. No one is saying that that's not the case.
But by focusing just on the larger problem, are we forgetting to take specific action against...
Specific corrective action against a very clear... I mean, look at the broad facts, right? There's been a horrifying rape and murder case, right, at RG Kar Hospital. Turns out a lot of the evidence is starting to prove that it was not just done by one person, but there's probably a whole ecosystem that was involved in perpetuating this. The people were powerful. They've managed to evade the law. The TMC being very much in control of the law there. People are saying they might have even aided and abetted in this. They've not taken action in time against the principal of the hospital.
And now they're protesting for swift justice.
Yeah. Now that the case has been handed to the CBI because of Kolkata police's failure, you have the chief minister of the state doing a march saying, I want to bring a swift justice and hanging. And how this is about a nexus between BJP and CPM. Talk about politicizing something which is such a real painful thing.
Something that happened under your leadership.
Yeah, they are in charge of law and order. It's been a complete failure. And I know I've spoken about this on the podcast before when I was talking about Salishi Sabhas that operate in West Bengal. Right? And I have gone and seen it. It is not the rosy liberal paradise that people think it is. And I think the elite Bengali intelligentsia, there's like ostrich level denial of what's going on in Calcutta and West Bengal. Right? And until they take a hard look at it, you're not actually going to get justice. We're going to have the platitudes, but you're not going to get justice. And until you have swift and hard justice on cases like this, it's just going to stay a conversation, right? So interestingly, when Hatras happened, people were quick to ask for the resignation of the chief minister. You've not seen that from the ecosystem here, right? Famous YouTubers had to put a post and then take down the post. Not going to take any names, right? So to think that there's not an agenda and a narrative at play is also naive. And it doesn't take away from the pain of the story, but the resolution has to be justice for that family too. I mean, there was a protest, a peaceful protest at the hospital, and a violent mob has come and like broken down, completely destroyed the protest site, the emergency room. And they're saying there was maybe even intent to destroy the place, destroy and tamper evidence because there are powerful people involved. I mean, it's shameful lack of law and order in the state. And I'm sorry, the responsibility lies with Mamata Banerjee. So if she's currently on a protest against herself, I don't really know how that works. But she has to figure it out. I think I don't want to spend too much more time on that because I know it's a painful topic. And I think Indian men need to do better. But I think that was, one of the things was at least good to see that the Prime Minister even brought it up in the speech. The second big thing, changing gears that we can talk about was the Prime Minister's mention of a secular civil code.
I've always been fascinated when I first read about the Uniform Civil Code in India. Then you'd hear it called the secular civil code. And, typically if you just walked into a room and you heard they're trying to implement a secular civil code, you'd be like, man, those anti-religion liberals are at it again, and then you'll talk to some people and be like, oh, that's odd. Not what I would expect from my stereotypical view of
Yeah.
right and left politics.
Yeah,
So
no-
that's an interesting thing right there. I think it speaks a bit to how accepting and liberal a religiously driven organization can even be.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, it's like you rightfully said, not something you'd conventionally associate with what the papers like to call right-wing fascist Hindu nationalist government, right? You would not hear the words secular civil code being said ideally by, theoretically by a leader of that party. But
Yeah.
politics is not as it is here. It's very different, right? And I think the more people try and understand why that might be the case, I think the more informed they'll be. So I think the Prime Minister bringing up something like this, which, by the way, before people say, oh, this is unconstitutional. If it ever gets done, Rohan, you're going to have a section of Indians that are going to call it unconstitutional. I know that Rahul Gandhi, in his famous presser after they lost the third election in a row, but I guess felt like they won, did a press conference and held up a big constitution. I hope they actually open that constitution and go to the page where it says that we hopefully will get a universal civil code, uniform civil code, right? So it is literally mentioned as something that we aspire for in the constitution. And I think that the government has done kind of tests in was it the Uttarakhand government that has tried this. So the fear basically, there's a few fears we can get into.
Okay.
One is that the government uses a very conservative framework when designing the civil code, which kind of is strange. Like I think in the Uttarakhand one, they had some points on like live-in relationships
Okay.
that were controversial or suspect, right? On how maybe they'll have to report that or something like that under their kind of test uniform civil code. But I guess the biggest one is that it's going to affect personal religious laws that exist in the country, right? Whether it's Hindu code bill, Muslim personal law, so on and so forth. I think any self-respecting liberal, myself included, would think that this is something we've needed in the country for a long time. You cannot have separate religious laws, right? You should have a civil law that everyone is a party to, right? Marriage ages should be fixed, right? We are not Iraq, I hope, right? Where we are passing laws where women can get married at the age of 9. But it's baffling to me that this is a controversial issue. I don't know. What do you think? Why is it a controversial issue? Is it just because we hate this party so much?
If you take like a macro lens on it, it's one of those issues where I can't believe it had not been done 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Or wasn't even done right at the founding of our constitution.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
then, yeah.
it's very hard for me to even take like a political stance on it. It seems that obvious, but it obviously is not that simple.
And then when someone says, hey, look, there has been some element of appeasement politics at play, right? It's not this communal dog whistling thing. There actually were appeasement politics at play. I'm reading a book right now. I've referenced it in the past, right? Accelerating State Development by Karthik Jairam. And yeah, it is a case when you are appeasing a vote bank, it's not the best policies that you're going to come out with.
And I think when we look at, especially amongst elite Indians, where we look as our aspirational value, these liberal Western countries, I think this is the bedrock of these countries.
Yeah. That it's one law that governs everyone, no personal religious laws.
And I think that's a great thing to take from those countries, even if you're on the right wing, clearly, as the government is trying to do.
Exactly. And what I find interesting, I think you're seeing a narrative shift with Prime Minister Modi and the BJP as well, to instead of say uniform civil code, to say secular civil code.
There's no way that is not a very strategically planned move. And it is bold.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very bold. It's also targeting those few people who have worn secularism on their chest as their mantra.
Correct.
And I think that was the most fascinating part of it, because it's so well timed. Like he could have done this 2 years ago and it would not have maybe had the same effect as it's had after this election.
Yeah. Clearly the post-election strategy office is thinking, and they're going to have to try and I think obviously do a lot of different things. Because I do think, the Congress has put up a really good fight, and, they do have good thoughts and ideas. So,
and if they are pushing the government, the right-wing government right now, to further what should be their cause, then maybe this is some sort of, reverse psychology.
Yeah. Exactly. So I think all that to say, it's I think that was a very positive thing again that was brought up in the Independence Day speech. I think the other thing that I wanted to touch on, which again we've spoken about in the podcast, which I'm glad to see being brought up, was the idea of one nation, one election. Again, multiple studies have shown that the way we run electoral cycles is kind of cost ineffective and policy ineffective, right? Because no party is actually ending up doing the work. They're just fighting an election and then going back into election mode to fight another election.
Is one of the big criticisms of it that it would lend too much power to governments in hand, because
that's the idea, is that the center will try and influence the state elections because both are on the ballot at the same time. But I think from what I have seen, there seems to be bipartisan agreement, at least amongst intellectual political analysts, that look, this is something we should really consider, because we waste a lot of money on election.
Intellectual political analysts don't really make any of the decisions, I guess.
Apparently not. Apparently not. So, I hope that comes through. And I think the other big point that was brought up, which I really want to get your thoughts on, because it actually relates to us, was the Prime Minister bringing up Indians not having to leave the country to get world-class education and a world-class life.
Yeah. This is something that is actually very close to my heart, because it pains me that no matter how high you can rise in life in this country, things like clean air in a city are not afforded to you.
Dude, forget clean air. Basic infra is lacking.
Yeah, but I look at clean air as the most basic of infra.
Agreed. But I mean, it's just it is third world.
It's third
quality.
World, yeah, it's third world quality. I don't know if this is exactly where you're going. I know what he's talking about, especially in terms of education and things like that. But I've just always hated that in this country you have to choose between clean air or access to a good hospital and school.
Yeah.
They'll say, oh, there's clean air in the rest of India. Go there. I was like, there's no schools, there's no hospitals, there's no infrastructure there.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure comes at such a heavy cost.
See, I think we're going to have this problem of I think rapid industrial growth, which will have an effect on pollution and the environment. So the only approach will have to be, how can we fight that and grow at the same time and make other areas in the country.
That's mostly where I come to. There's too much focus on the cities.
Yeah.
There needs to be some type, and I know this is a very complicated issue, but I live in Mumbai. I don't see what the point of funneling more infrastructure in here is long term. It's already burst in some places. It's untenable.
Yeah.
This one thing that I really like, encapsulated in this one quote, I think by the Singaporean Prime Minister, an ex-Singaporean Prime Minister, is that a country becomes developed not when the poor can take private transport, but when the rich take public transport. Yeah. And I think Andheri West shitposting makes a lot of points that a lot of the infrastructure that's happening in the city is too car-centric.
Exactly.
And I agree with that.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing today that on the ceiling, that you can be jammed on the ceiling for 45 minutes. What is the point of the ceiling? You're paying a toll to get jammed for 45 minutes.
And you're going to frankly see more cars. So again, we have to think innovatively about this. But the only way you can do it is if you give a better economic opportunity outside Mumbai, right?
Yes.
So that's the only way that works.
And I think all the plan with these super cities that they were trying to set up, I've not really seen a lot of that come to fruition.
No. I did want to read out Lee Kuan Yew quote, since you brought him up, though, which I found very, very interesting, given that you just said it, because it talks about what the Prime Minister said, right? I'm just going to read it out. So Lee Kuan Yew said, because we're talking about why should students stay in India, right? That's what the Prime Minister is saying. Just listen to this part. Lee Kuan Yew, the former leader of Singapore, used to obsess over the airport experience in the first few miles to the city. Why? Because it's the onboarding experience for talented future citizens. Look at that future thinking. So he used to say, he used to inspect Singapore airport, the cleanliness of the toilets, speed of immigration queues, success rate of luggage handling. He wanted to create an onboarding experience so magical that people would question, why aren't they living there? And they basically ended up going and creating this world-class country that everyone wanted to work to or go to work in, right? So it has to happen at a state level where they have to think, how can we make it attractive? But I think we're a long way away. I think
Yeah.
it's very ambitious from the Prime Minister. Look, build world-class schools. There is massive brain drain, right, where people leave. I think there is more economic opportunity. You
Yeah.
are seeing more people move back.
He commented in the speech on how proud he was of the number of Indians who are becoming CEOs abroad.
Yeah.
But it's abroad.
Correct. And they're moving out. And, sorry to bring up that topic we just spoke about at the start, but, you can't really blame a woman for wanting to get out of the country
Yeah, at all.
at all, frankly. So there's a lot. I think just fixing the school part for me is not going to fix the people leaving, right? They're going to leave for many other reasons. And I know it's a lot of work that has to get done. And I know they're doing it actually. They're trying to develop tier 3, tier 4 aspirational district program. They're trying to bring up other places so people move there too.
Yeah, when it comes to safety, I just, people always compare Mumbai and Delhi.
Yeah.
And I've known enough girls who say that, I don't like Delhi, it's
Yeah.
unsafe, and they find
Yeah.
Mumbai safe. Mumbai has this thing of safety in numbers. Don't worry, there's always people around, so nothing will happen. That's like a really sad way to have safety. You should have safety because there is enough governmental control and deterrence, etc. Not just the fact that we're super crowded.
Correct. The problem that they face, like I said, we can't even begin to empathize. The problem might even be the person you go and report the FIR to at the police station is a cop who's an asshole. Right?
Yeah.
So, we have a long way to go, and I
Yeah.
think making it an attractive place for people to stay, because I think students aren't just staying for the education.
And I think this is another place where some of the new criminal laws, digitizing the process, can really, help push some of this through. When you're in such a vulnerable place, maybe you don't want to go to another super male-dominated police station where someone's going to insensitively take your report, as we've seen done.
Happen so many
So
times.
many videos come out and you see it's so sad. These cops
Yeah.
are just someone's there complaining about harassment or sexual violence, and the cops are, sipping chai, just walking around like they own the place.
Or victim blaming them.
Or victim blaming them.
Yeah. So, like I said, I think it's very noble, and I know that they have intent in making it a place where students will want to stay. Getting great schools and great working opportunities, as even we saw in the budget, will help, certainly. But I think in this generation, it's not just good opportunity. They're looking for a good quality of life.
Yeah.
Clean air, clean water, safety. And I think until we have those, not just in the cities, but outside the cities, we're not going to have those many people that choose to stay here.
Yeah. So hopefully, look at this as a mini manifesto, and
I think so.
see.
Let's see how much they deliver.
Yeah.
Based on both the budget and this, it's nice to see that they've still not given into ultra populist tendencies. They had to throw a bone obviously to Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, which they did in the budget. But other than that, and they squeeze the middle class as always on taxes. But I hope with my taxes, we have better roads and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
let's move on to the broadcast bill, man.
Yeah.
Because that is going to be close to our hearts. Hopefully not. Hopefully things move smoothly forward. But
yeah, I don't do this as a business. I just do it
Yeah.
for fun. Let the record reflect.
But, when I first heard of the broadcast bill and I saw the reactions to it, heavily politicized broadcast bill, but my first initial thought was actually that, this is just a simple acceptance of the fact that today digital media plays the role that mainstream news, television, and radio media played in the past.
100%.
It is, in fact, silly that we didn't have a broadcast bill so far.
Yeah, dude, it's like you said, it's legacy media clearly has left such a massive gap, right? Such a massive gap that all these content creators exist. People are turning to them for news.
Yes, and if, as we were, and maybe should be, okay with the government having some level of oversight on what could be said on news media because of all the reasons that look at how much impact they could have. They could really, if they provide some crazy misinformation, they should be held accountable, etc., etc. They have to verify things. There are laws that govern media outlets in the mainstream. And those laws are based on the reach of these media outlets.
Correct.
Now, YouTube has a reach that exceeds some of these media outlets.
Exactly.
How can that same logic not apply here? So this is the without the politics look on it.
Yeah. Without the politics look is that if you believe that the government should play a role on regulating
what millions and millions of people see.
Yeah. In fact, let's use the word, what millions and millions of people consume. So if you believe the same way government should be slamming FSSAI for the way they regulate food, you should be regulating speech. People control speech, right? Even as someone who I would say, it makes me very uncomfortable because I'm like, I really believe that you should be able to say what you want, right? But India is so informationally porous and fragile, I think.
Yeah, like we've mentioned, so many people in our population are not accustomed yet to this level of media input.
Yeah.
I'd say just given how fast tech has progressed in the last 10 years, no one is actually, it's not about media tech savvy people. Like probably on a biological level, we are not conditioned to be having this much media input, something that you can't change with education.
Correct. And where I do share like the fear, and I know we've spoken about this, is that it does have a very strong, I think, authoritarian undertone. And I think that's why they've withdrawn the bill, right? They've withdrawn the bill based on large-scale criticism, which I thought was valid, right? That it could open the door to a lot of censorship.
Oh, like many other bills before, just ambiguously written, leave scope for crazy levels of censorship, political exploitation.
Correct.
I mean, all that was so clearly not a well-written bill at all.
Yeah. And the timing of it, right? Like, you know that the government has likely taken a hit in the last Lok Sabha election because of, let's say, the influence of content creators, regardless of whether they were actually accurate in their reporting. But they did take a hit. So is it like a retaliatory bill? I think these are real concerns, frankly. But I do think also parts of it, if you read it, you would again think that this is something straight out of like a liberal handbook, right? They're saying that if you're big enough and you're essentially a digital news broadcaster, I think that's the word. So then you're like notify with the Ministry of Information. So if you are registered as a digital news broadcaster, you have to, essentially notify the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and then you're essentially part of their ambit. And but what I found interesting is if you're big enough, you need to have essentially a content evaluation committee.
Krish, you ready for the job?
You're going to be
if we ever get big enough.
Yeah. So like that is something which again is not a new concept, by the way. A lot of countries have this. I actually have a problem with this because who decides what the evaluation committee says? But actually this draft proposal of the bill said that, you should have diverse perspective, including scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. So again, it's actually like massive inclusivity rhetoric. Again, something that you would not see from like a fascist right wing, but something that's saying, hey, your content evaluation should have a more holistic viewpoint.
Yeah, old Twitter's handbook.
Yeah, exactly.
And the irony being that this is what happens when you conflate left-wing ideologies too much and just follow the herd potentially.
Yeah.
Is that these are the same people who would be very happy that people like Elon Musk or Donald Trump should be, say, censored on Twitter because, hey, they could provide so much misinformation and they have such a big following and these people may just do something crazy.
Yeah.
We can't let them do that.
Exactly. See, the EU has gone after big time. Let me read out a paragraph to you, Ron.
Okay.
And just to my co-host and the listeners, I want you to really do something once I read this. In the first exercise of its kind, EU officials were allowed into X, formerly known as Twitter's headquarters, on Thursday to carry out a mock exercise with Twitter staff to test its controls on Russian propaganda, fake news, criminal activity, including child sexual exploitation. Now, I want you to switch out EU officials with Indian officials and switch and say Indian officials were allowed into the company's headquarters to do a mock test on propaganda from Pakistan and China, fake news. Dude, you would immediately see this as a descent into fascism and the failure of democracy on that article headline. Put your hand on your heart. Wouldn't that be the case? But this is what the EU is doing. And I would say they have a good reason to. Like Twitter and these are like cesspools for very violent and very dangerous content and, pre-election Russian disinformation and all those things. But if you're okay with that regulation there, you have to think about some level of regulation in a country where there's a very real human risk to disinformation.
Yeah.
But again, I'm glad that they've pulled the bill back based on the controversy that it stirred up, because I thought the controversy and the critique was very valid. Right? But yeah, that paragraph really jarred me. I was like, can you imagine that in India? That would be front of headline.
Yeah.
If you said the Indian government stormed into, if you said the Indian government had gone to Twitter to conduct a mock test to see what was misinformation.
Or it would be the Fade D'Souza or something.
100%. I think that's what we've always come to on the podcast. We've gotten so polarized that we're not using an objective lens when we're evaluating laws. It's just completely my camp, your camp.
Speaking of objective lens, why do people think we're fucking idiots because of our Sobo accents?
I don't know. People hate South Bombay, I guess. But it's just how I speak, dude.
They call it a fake accent. They call it a fake accent. You know how insulting that is to how I speak? You get it? Cause this is my real voice and my real accent, whatever real accent means.
Yeah.
Just do this whole most Indians who've been abroad, by the way, have had fake accents.
Yeah.
We all put on an American accent when we go
because they don't
America.
understand us.
So if you think my accent is already Americanized or whatever, I actually have a fake American accent so they can understand me. And I just feel we've gotten such a bad rap. Maybe because so many dumb things are said in this voice. This is the dumb way to say, bro, I'm just chilling, bro.
Yeah.
Man, like this, that. Like Erica Packard does these
hilarious, she kills it. She kills it. It's too real.
And it's so on point. And I get we're easy to hate on because, Sobo people are very privileged.
Yeah,
and they
disconnected.
Are disconnected, privileged. It's easy to punch up. And I think the irony, of course, sometimes is that, which I completely accept, is that we talk a lot about decoloniality, but we would have a much harder time doing this podcast in Hindi.
I don't know. चाहे तो हम ये पॉडकास्ट हिंदी में कर सकते हैं या तो मैं तमिल में कर सकता हूँ और वो मराठी में भी कर सकता है. But if you are listening to what language we're speaking in and not what we're saying, then you're clearly missing what this podcast is about.
And I just, one thing I always thought that was really funny, that I was watching a podcast which was like a Hindi podcast, and it's advertised as a Hindi podcast.
Yeah.
And this is the line I heard on it. It's like, हमारे कंट्री के डेवलपमेंट में प्रोग्रेस चाहिए.
Yeah, it's like English basically, right?
I was like, country development progress. All the words doing the heavy lifting were in English.
Yeah, you're like 70% English.
Yeah, it's just you have the grammatical structuring of Hindi.
Yeah.
So, we should do some stuff in Hindi, but I just think that a combination of English and this Sobo accent, people just think it's fake.
Yeah.
Because they don't speak like it.
Correct.
Like if I spoke how you probably speak, whoever thinks I have a fake accent, that would be a fake accent. And that should be insulting and offensive. Not how I actually speak.
But I think that whole thing, we have a very odd relationship, frankly, with people speaking English. Everyone wants to speak it because it can be a ticket to economic empowerment. But at the same time, I do think people should be more proud of their language and their heritage.
Yeah.
Right?
We got caught, bro. The 90s generation just got caught in that when 90s Bombay, looking down on Indian culture.
Yeah.
And that aspiration of the West had just become available to us. We could all see ourselves going to universities. This is when kids were starting going en masse to universities abroad and coming back and relocating there and having this really westernized life. And that's all we wanted.
Yeah.
In fact, it was only Star Kids. Star Kids coming out of South Bombay is a very new thing.
Yeah.
Growing up, in my thing, it was no one even watched Bollywood.
Yeah. Now they kind of have to learn Hindi because they have some of their job.
Exactly. You see all these people learning Hindi and stuff. I was like, bro, y'all never, generations, y'all guys never spoke in Hindi growing up. Y'all just have to do it for work now. But
that's my thing. I think for me, it's just not as much of a gotcha as people think it is. This is how we speak. This is the language that we learned.
The other one we get is these North Indians.
Yeah, I'm not North Indian.
I'm from Pune.
Yeah, so neither of us are, but that's what I'm saying. It's like people make these frameworks in their head, and when you don't fall into that framework, I swear they don't know what to do. Right? It's like, wait, but I could easily hate on them because they're North Indian, but now they're not. What do we do? Like this just breaks their like preconceived notions of how things should fit in. Right?
Yeah.
Right? No, like these guys have to be left wing. This is right wing. Mamta is a defender of women's rights. This guy is this. This guy is this. And when you shake that up, it becomes oh my God, I didn't see this coming. But it's not black and white. It's never has been black and white.
Anyways,
Yeah. To end the note on our 78th year of independence, I just want to bring up one of my favorite quotes from a man who obviously a lot of us detest here, rightfully so, Mr. Churchill, who said, "If independence is granted to India, power will go to the hands of rascals, rogues, freebooters. All Indian leaders will be of low caliber and men of straw. They will have sweet tongues and silly hearts. They will fight amongst themselves for power, and India will be lost in political squabble." So, not for left, not for right, not for any cause, but let's just stay together to prove this asshole wrong. Happy Independence Day.
okay, that's a great note to end on. Cheers, guys. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more episodes.